Hi there, this is Judy Bruce from Judith Bruce Coaching, and I wanted to welcome you today to my latest video on tidbits about leadership, about life in general, and topics that come up through my interaction in daily activities and life. The topic this week that I wanted to share with you is called What's the Problem? So, from our earliest memory, most of us can remember occasions where, as little kids, we were falling on the ground, crying, thinking that some event or some action that was taken against us was going to create the end of the world, and we were crying our eyes out. And some adult in our lives would come by and say, "What's the problem?" And that phrase or that question, "What's the problem?" has followed us throughout most of our lives. And the interesting thing about it is we all know to ask that question, and we all can tell you what the problem is. So when we go amongst our friends and one of us or one of our friends' face or their expression or their mood doesn't look like they normally behave, we pull them aside and we say, "What's the problem?" Our bosses may ask us on occasion, "What's the problem?" Or we as bosses may then refer to our co-workers or our reportees and ask them the same question. So I've never met anybody who couldn't point out what the problem is. And usually with great enthusiasm and gusto and sort of taking a perverse pleasure in telling us of some impending doom with the problem. So what differentiates leaders from others is that the leaders tend to move on beyond identifying just the problem and quickly set about looking for the opportunities to find solutions. Most people can't really ever look past the problem, and they ruminate over it and not realizing that any sort of lack of action or lack of consideration or thought in how to solve the problem is not doing them any good, not doing their organization or their department or their co-workers. And we have also encountered situations or heard about situations where in a crisis, people freeze and don't know what to do. And that lack of ability to move past the crisis and find what they can do can be the difference between saving a life or losing a life. So identifying what's a problem is not the difficult part of things. We all know what the problems tend to be in different situations. One of the, so in the discipline that I have learned, which is the IPEC coaching system, which is based on the kinetic theory of energy, most of us, when we're under stress, or nearly all of us, and I've never encountered anyone in my analysis who has been in a level of energy that stress affects it, that is high. So in this theory, there are 7 levels of energy, and most of us, especially under stress, tend to dive into the lowest 2 levels, level 1 and level 2. Level 1, we act as a victim, and level 2, we act with anger. I always tell everybody that in Jamaica, the taxi drivers live at level 2, and it's very difficult for most of us who drive and are not taxi drivers to not respond to their level by getting annoyed with them as well. It's always a game on my way home or to work in the days to try and keep myself at a higher level and not push myself down into their level 2 of anger and aggression. So level 1, in level 1, the core thought in there is apathy and powerlessness, and the core emotion is apathy. I don't know what to do. And level 2, where the core energy is anger and the core thought is conflict. So when individuals who are leaders are caught up in the levels 1 and 2, they usually are unable to move to the proactive, positive thoughts where solutions germinate. So in our discipline, teaching or helping people to identify what is their triggers to go down to level 1 or 2, and helping people to identify how quickly they can pull themselves out of those levels is one of the skills that we do in coaching. So leaders and great leaders are expected to find solutions. And most of us, especially those of us in Jamaica, tend to look to our leaders for the solution and for the answers. We have a very popular saying in the lower economic levels of the country, where people will look at you and say, I say, how are you? And they look at you and say, government not doing anything for me in our local patois. And it's that kind of situation where we are waiting for somebody to do something for us. So also, and I think maybe, and that's a cultural thing in us, and probably historically based from our roots of slavery, where generations of people have been taught to be told what to do. Individuals are really have not been encouraged to propose solutions either in business or even often in their personal lives. In fact, there's a very well-known saying in Jamaica where children are yelled at when they're making too much noise, or they're interrupting adult conversation, and told that children are to be seen and not heard. And therefore, as kids, children are often not encouraged to participate and to be thinking and to find solutions to issues. So then, you're admonished throughout your youth, and then when you become an adult, all of a sudden somebody wants you to speak up or to come up with a solution or to take the lead, not realizing that for most of our formative years, people have not encouraged you to do so. So you're just expected to intuitively know how to do this, and without being encouraged to do so when you were children. And of course, there is that underlying fear that you may do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, so people tend not to speak up. I don't know what this is like in other countries. I suspect, like in the United States, people are more encouraged to express themselves even as kids, and therefore they have the opportunity to kind of hone that skill of speaking up and coming up with ideas and solutions. We have recently been introduced into the school system in Jamaica to do critical thinking, and this is a tool that persons feel, intellectuals and academics feel internationally, is a tool that we should hone in our kids, because critical thinking is what we need to do to be able to find solutions to our lives, to analyze situations and move on from just ruminating in what's the problem. So an incident happened recently in my world that obviously there was a problem, and a supervisor contacted us and was able to very vocally and very animatedly tell us what the problem was. And while we were trying to calm the person down and say to them, okay, we got the problem, what's the solution? They couldn't get past that whole thing and going over it and over it and over it. And that's really what brought me to this topic today. So in coaching, one of the things that, and coaching young people who are going to be leaders, and even leaders who may not be yet excellent, but are practicing the tools that they need to be great leaders, one of the greatest things is that they need to be able to find solutions. And thinking through the problem and moving away from just seeing a problem to finding solutions and looking for solutions is what differentiates good leaders from ordinary leaders. So each of us, as I remind you every week, and I will continue to do so, leads our own life. So whether or not we are leaders in our organizations or leaders in some other form, each of us lead our own lives. And I keep reminding people that leading your life is what makes you either a fulfill a successful life and make life happen for you, or allow things to happen to you and therefore leave you with a life that is just rolls along. And therefore, to me, going past what's the problem is one of those skills that all of us need to identify, recognize, and little by little practice. Because if we don't practice, we're going to get stuck. And getting stuck is the worst thing that we could do. Now, I have, just to remind you, that my website, which is www.judithbrucecoaching.com, has my videos, and you'll see a tab at the top of the page. My Facebook page will have it. And I also remind you that if you have any comments, please feel free to leave them, because your comments are helpful to me to create topics or videos that would be helpful to you. And also, if you want a free resource in what the three missing things or the three elements that top leaders should have, you can sign up and download that free resource. I thoroughly enjoy doing these, and I'm hoping that you will find a way to identify aspects of this that you need, and hopefully we can have a relationship going on further where we can do we can even do some coaching with you or with your leadership teams as you find these useful. And I really want to thank you for joining and for the support that you've given so far, and I look forward to having you in my space next week. Thank you.